Sausage.
Hello, everyone. This is Attack the Backlog, the podcast where I, Mark Kuznez, tries to make a dent in their backlog one game at a time. This episode is all about Vampire Survivors, a game that sucks away most of the controls so you can watch numbers explode eventually because, oh my, does this game start slow. What if Diablo, but instead of holding 2 buttons, you're only holding 1 button? What if twin stick shooter, but instead of moving and shooting, you're only moving and the game itself does all the shooting? In other words, what if twin stick shooter, but instead only child shooter? Parentheses, I don't mean shooting children unless we're talking about shooting them smiles. What if pretty good music, but instead of pretty good music, it had pretty great music? What if I stopped this bit already and got on with the show? Yes? Okay. Vampire Survivors is a game that came out of nowhere, going from just another Steam Early Access title to a BAFTA Game of the Year winner. A year when other games up for the award included Elden Ring, God of War Ragnarok, and Horizon Forbidden West. That is quite the competition and says a lot about Survivors, or more accurately, says a lot about the people who do the voting at BAFTA, because while I managed to eventually find the fun in Survivors, I never found the Game of the Year in it. Vampire Survivors is an incredibly simple game and there's nothing wrong with that, but nothing about it screams innovation or anything other than, hey, do you need something to kill some time with? Well then, do I have the game for you. At its core, Vampire Survivors is a twin-stick shooter where the accessibility option for auto-aiming and auto-firing is always on with no way of turning it off. This isn't innovative. It's just taking an option from a genre and making an entire game around it. First and foremost, Vampire Survivors is a terrible name. Terrible because while you are technically trying to survive, what you really need to be doing is leveling up as much as possible and as fast as possible. Failing to do so will lead to an almost certain death roughly 12 minutes into a level, the point at which it starts hitting the fan, so leveling up is key. I struggled initially because I took the name to heart. I was doing all I could to stay far away from enemies that, while I was surviving, I wasn't leveling. I wasn't leveling because leveling requires gems dropped from slain enemies, and I was too concerned with surviving that I didn't concern myself with collecting set arms. This was my initial downfall. What am I doing wrong? I asked. And why do people like this game so much? I quickly learned the answer to question number 1, level up. Stupid, because leveling up provides you with perks like new weapons, increased weapon damages, and so on and so forth, but I was still seeking an answer to question number 2. Why do people like Vampire Survivors so much? I still don't have an answer to this, but I was at least able to find the fun in Survivors eventually. Ignoring my initial avoidance versus leveling hiccup, the early sections of Vampire Survivors are incredibly boring. Boring because the default speed is slow as fuck, and even when shit does start hitting the fan, it all feels like it's being stretched out in order to do I don't know what, because Survivors is only $5 and you don't have to stretch out your content that much in order to make me feel like I didn't waste my money. It's okay. You can make shorter levels. You don't have to make me play every level for 30 minutes in order to quote-unquote beat them, especially when the default speed is somewhere just south of power walking. Thankfully, once you've survived a level and defeated its main boss, which shows up at the 25-minute mark, you will unlock something called Hyper Mode, a mode which increases player and enemy movement speed by 65 to 75% in addition to a few other increases, all of which make Vampire Survivors go from a rather boring time to at least something that's somewhat engaging and more active than passive. It sucks that you have to endure a level at least once in order to unlock Hyper Mode. I would have preferred it being available right from the start, but at least it's there at all and quickly became the only way I play any level. As far as I'm concerned, Hyper Mode is the default mode, and what the game says is the default mode is actually Baby Mode, and while no one puts Baby in corner, Baby Mode should 100% be put in corner if I have any swayzy about it. In addition to Hyper Mode, you'll unlock Hurry Mode, which picks up the pace and doubles the clock speed so levels only take 15 minutes instead of 30 minutes. This is great if you know you only have 15 40 minutes to play instead of 30, but I don't think it's as essential to general enjoyment as hyper mode is. Now that we know the game is about leveling and know there's a way to speed things up, we're having a good time, right? For the most part, yes. Okay, in actuality, I started enjoying myself quite a bit once I figured the game out. As you play more and more, you'll discover new weapons and new modifiers, increasing stuff like movement speed, attack damage, weapon duration, and so on and so forth. And with these discoveries will come weapon evolutions that occur when you link typically a weapon and a modifier and level up said weapon to the max, and no, I'm not talking about HBO. These evolutions greatly increase a weapon's abilities while also making all the booms on screen ever so slightly prettier. Vampire Survivors is enjoyable for what it is and is the perfect podcast game. It hits those same dopamine points that games like Diablo do, where you're not actually doing all that much, but despite the lack of user input, you're rewarded with lots of numbers on screen and lots of loot drops, so you always feel like you're getting something from what is essentially a lot of nothing. Vampire Survivors is a game that asks very little of you input-wise, but demands your full and undying attention, a bit of a weird dichotomy. But if you take the time to figure out its intricacies and, for the love of God, only play on hyper mode once you unlock it, I think you'll have a good enough time. That said, I was not drawn to keep playing once I beat every level once and tried out all of the awful bonus levels one time. Mileage will vary, but for me, once I saw basically all the game had to offer, I found no reason to discover those few items I had yet to find, those few evolutions I had yet to make mine, or anything else that would take up even a fraction more of my time. I may come back here and there when I have nothing else better to do and want to kill some time, but sans that, I'm perfectly fine leaving Vampire Survivors as a game I enjoyed over 2 nights and roughly 10 hours of my life. Anyway, that will do it for this here episode of Attack the Backlog. Once again, I am Mark Nez. Y'all can find me pretty much everywhere at PX Sausage. The site, the YouTube, the Discord, Patreon, and so on and so forth can be found over at pxsausage.com. The Patreon is, of course, the best way to support me if you so choose, patreon.com/pxs. But that is it. That is all. As always, thank you for watching or listening. I hope you enjoyed this here episode, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. So for now, adios, arrivederci, bye!